The emergency alarms screamed through Empress Thera's cockpit as her royal shuttle spiraled toward the human trade station. She could still hear the explosions from the assassination attempt, still see the faces of her trusted guards who had died protecting her escape. Her hands shook on the controls as she fought to keep the vessel steady. This wasn't how an Empress was supposed to die, alone, hunted, crashing into some backwater human outpost at the edge of civilized space. The landing was rough. Metal shrieked against metal as her shuttle scraped across the docking platform in the lower districts. Thera sat in the darkness for a moment, catching her breath, checking for injuries. Nothing broken. But her ship was done. Smoke poured from the engine compartment, and half the control panels were dead. She couldn't call for help. Not from her people. The assassins had come from within her own court, and she didn't know who to trust anymore. Thera stripped off her royal insignia, threw a worn cloak over her formal attire, and stepped out into the grimy streets of the station's industrial sector. She needed to disappear, and she needed her ship fixed before the hunters found her trail. The mechanic shops in this area were nothing like the spotless imperial hangars she was used to. Oil stains covered the floors. The air smelled of burnt metal and cheap fuel. Most of the shops were closed, their owners long asleep. But one place still had a light on, a flickering dim glow coming from a garage at the end of the street. Thera pushed open the door and found herself in the most disorganized workspace she'd ever seen. Tools scattered everywhere. Parts piled in corners. And in the middle of it all, a young human man sat hunched over a workbench, his face illuminated by a small flashlight clamped to the edge of the table. He was so focused on the manual in front of him that he didn't even hear her enter. "Excuse me," Thera said, trying to keep her voice steady and common. "Are you open?" The human looked up, startled. He had grease smudged across his cheek and tired eyes that suggested he'd been awake far too long. "Oh, sorry. Didn't hear you come in." He set down the flashlight and stood, wiping his hands on an already filthy rag. "Jake Miller. What can I do for you?" Thera glanced at the manual he'd been reading. It was written in Velkoth script, her own language. Technical specifications for pulse drive systems, the kind used in military and commercial vessels. "You read Velkoth?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. Jake looked embarrassed. "Trying to. Got the manual from a salvage dealer. Costs less than the translated versions." He shrugged. "Station cuts power to the lower districts after midnight to save money. Flashlight's all I got, but it works." She stared at him. An empress of the most powerful civilization in 3 sectors was standing in a mechanic's shop, watching a human teach himself alien engineering by flashlight because he couldn't afford proper lighting. The absurdity of it almost made her laugh. "I need repairs," she said. "My ship is damaged. It's on platform 7. Jake grabbed his toolkit and followed her outside. When he saw the shuttle, his eyes went wide. "That's a Velkoth Imperial-class vessel," he said quietly. "Ma'am, I've never worked on anything like this before. This is way beyond what I usually handle." Thera's heart sank. "Can you try?" He walked around the ship slowly, examining the damage with his flashlight. She watched him trace the hull with his fingers, peer into the smoking engine compartment, check the landing gear. His movements were careful, methodical. He pulled out a battered notebook from his back pocket and started sketching diagrams, making notes in the margins. "I'm self-taught," Jake admitted, not looking up from his notebook. "Can't afford academy training. Most of what I know comes from manuals and trial and error. But I'm willing to give it a shot if you are. I won't charge you unless I actually fix something." Thera had commanded fleets. She had negotiated treaties with alien warlords. She had sentenced criminals to death with a single word. But right now, her life depended on this human mechanic who studied by flashlight and couldn't afford a proper education. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why study so hard when you don't have the resources?" Jake looked at her, and for the first time she saw something in his eyes that she recognized: determination. Pure, stubborn, unbreakable determination. "Because giving up is boring," he said simply. "And because nobody gets to tell me what I'm capable of learning. Not the academies that rejected me, not the station administrators who won't fix our power grid, nobody." He turned back to her ship. "Let me grab some tools. This is going to take a while." As Thera watched him disappear into his shop, she felt something shift inside her. This human had nothing. No money, no formal training, no advantages. Just a flashlight, some stolen manuals, and a refusal to quit. And somehow that made her feel safer than all her royal guards ever had. Maybe, just maybe, she'd found exactly the person she needed. The first morning, Thera watched Jake stare at her ship's primary stabilizer for 20 minutes without touching anything. Just looking. She was about to tell him to hurry when he finally moved, pulling out his notebook and sketching the component from 3 different angles. "In my empire, technicians would have already started disassembly by now," she said, trying not to sound impatient. Jake didn't look up from his drawing. "Yeah, well, in your empire, technicians probably have the right tools and replacement parts. I've got a wrench set and whatever I can find in the scrap yard." He tapped his pencil against the paper. "So I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with before I touch anything." She wanted to argue, but something stopped her. Back home, Imperial technicians worked from detailed manuals that told them exactly which tool to use, which part to remove first, what order to follow. They never deviated. They never improvised. They simply followed the rules, and the rules always assumed you had everything you needed. By noon, Jake had filled 4 pages of his notebook with observations. He'd measured the stabilizer with a length of string because he didn't have proper measuring instruments. He'd compared it to diagrams in his salvaged manual, marking differences and similarities. Then he disappeared into the scrap yard behind his shop. Thera followed him, curious despite herself. The scrap yard was exactly what it sounded like: piles of broken ship parts, discarded machinery and rusted metal. Jake dug through it like he was mining for treasure, occasionally pulling out pieces that looked like garbage to her. "What are you doing?" she finally asked. "Making tools," he said, holding up a bent piece of metal. "See this? Wrong shape, wrong size, but the material is similar to what I need. I can heat it, bend it, reshape it into something that'll work." He grinned at her confusion. "Can't buy what I need, so I make it. It's slower, but it teaches you things about the metal, about how things fit together." She watched him spend the entire afternoon at a makeshift forge, heating and hammering that scrap metal into a specialized tool. In her empire, if a technician needed a tool, they simply requested it from supply. It would arrive within hours, perfectly manufactured. Jake spent 5 hours making something that probably wouldn't work as well as the original. But when he finally used his homemade tool on her ship's stabilizer, it worked. Not perfectly, but well enough. The second day, Jake encountered a component he couldn't identify. It wasn't in any of his manuals. Thera knew exactly what it was: a plasma regulator standard on all Imperial vessels. She opened her mouth to explain, but Jake was already taking it apart. "You're going to break it," she warned. "Maybe," he agreed. "But I'll learn how it works." He disassembled the regulator piece by piece, laying each component on his workbench in order. He drew everything, labeled everything, made notes about how each piece connected to the others. Then he sat there, just thinking, occasionally picking up pieces and examining them under his flashlight. "It's a flow controller," he finally said. "Whatever runs through here needs to be regulated. The pattern suggests plasma or high-energy particles. These components here act as gates, and this central piece must monitor pressure or temperature." He looked at her. "Am I close?" Thera felt something like shock. "Yes. How did you?" "Logic," Jake said. "And pattern recognition. Most engineering follows similar principles. You just have to look at how things are built and ask why." He started reassembling the regulator. "Your people designed this really well, by the way. Elegant. But also complicated. They probably have specialized equipment to service it." "They do," Thera admitted. "Right. Which means your technicians never have to really understand it. They just swap it out when it breaks." Jake finished the reassembly and held up the regulator. "I don't have a replacement. So I need to actually fix it, which means I need to actually understand it." By the 3rd day, Thera stopped trying to help. She just watched. Jake's notebook was now filled with detailed schematics, observations, and what he called creative workarounds. He'd fixed the stabilizer using parts from 3 different systems. He'd jury-rigged the plasma regulator with components that had no business working together but somehow did. He'd even improved the coolant flow by rerouting it through a secondary channel he'd discovered while mapping the ship systems. "This isn't how we do things," Thera said, watching him work. "I know," Jake replied. "Your way is probably better. Faster. More reliable. But your way requires resources I don't have." He wiped sweat from his forehead. "Limitation breeds creativity. When you can have anything you want, you stop thinking about alternatives." That hit her harder than she expected. Her empire was wealthy beyond measure. They had the best technology, the best materials, the best trained technicians. But when had they last actually innovated? When had they last solved a problem without throwing money and resources at it? When had anyone in her empire needed to think like Jake, to improvise and adapt and create something from nothing? Your ship will fly again, Jake said. It won't be pretty and I wouldn't recommend any high-speed maneuvers, but it'll get you where you need to go. Thera looked at her patchwork shuttle, then at the human mechanic covered in grease and sweat. He'd done in 3 days what her Imperial technicians might have said was impossible without proper facilities. And he'd done it with scrap metal, a flashlight, and sheer determination. Jake, she said quietly, you're wasted in this garage. He laughed. Tell that to the academies that rejected my applications. Jake was under the ship checking the landing gear when the sound of heavy boots echoed through the district. Thera's blood went cold. She'd heard that sound her entire life. Military boots moving in formation. Imperial soldiers. She grabbed Jake's leg, pulling him out from under the shuttle. We need to hide. Now. He saw the panic in her eyes and didn't argue. They ducked behind a stack of cargo containers just as 6 soldiers in Velkoth armor entered the platform area. Their leader carried a scanning device, sweeping it across the docking bays. They're tracking the ship's signature, Thera whispered. Her hands were shaking. They'll find it in minutes. Jake watched the soldiers move with professional efficiency, checking each vessel methodically. Who are you really? He asked quietly. Because regular travelers don't get hunted by military squads. Thera closed her eyes. She'd been running for 3 days, hiding behind a disguise, pretending to be someone ordinary. But the lie was over. My name is Thera. Empress Thera of the Velkoth Empire. Someone in my court tried to kill me. I don't know who I can trust, so I ran. She waited for his reaction. Shock maybe. Fear. Or worse, the calculating look of someone seeing a massive reward. The Empire would pay a fortune for information about her location. Enough money to change Jake's entire life. Jake was quiet for a long moment, watching the soldiers. Then he asked the last question she expected. Do you want to go back? What? Simple question. He turned to look at her. Do you want to go back to your empire? To that life? To whoever tried to kill you? Thera opened her mouth, then closed it. No one had ever asked her what she wanted. She was an empress. She had duties, responsibilities, obligations. What she wanted had never mattered. I don't know, she finally admitted. Jake nodded like that made perfect sense. Then let's make sure you have time to figure it out. Before she could stop him, he crawled toward her shuttle, staying low behind the containers. Thera's heart hammered as she watched him slip inside through the maintenance hatch. What was he doing? The soldiers would see him. They'd capture him. A small explosion popped inside the ship. Nothing dramatic, just a contained burst that sent sparks flying from one panel. Jake rolled out from under the shuttle and scrambled back to their hiding spot just as the soldiers spun toward the noise. What did you do? Thera hissed. Destroyed the royal transponder, Jake said, breathing hard. The thing broadcasting your ship's identity. Now it's just another damaged shuttle on a station full of damaged shuttles. He met her eyes. They can't track you anymore. But you also can't prove who you are. No going back now. Thera couldn't find words. The reward for my location is more money than you'd make in 10 lifetimes. Why would you? Because everyone deserves the choice to walk away from a life that's trying to kill them, Jake interrupted. I don't care if you're an empress or a docking clerk. Nobody should be forced back into a situation where they're not safe. The soldiers were spreading out now, searching more aggressively. Their leader barked orders in Velkoth, frustrated by the transponder's sudden silence. They'd start checking every ship manually soon, and it was only a matter of time before they found Jake's garage and the damaged Imperial shuttle sitting right outside. We need to move, Jake whispered. Can you run? Thera had commanded fleets. She'd negotiated with warlords. She'd sentenced traitors to death without flinching. But she'd never run for her life through grimy station corridors while soldiers hunted her. Yes, she said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Jake led her through a maze of back alleys and service corridors. He moved with absolute certainty, never hesitating at intersections, always knowing which passages to take. Behind them, she could hear the soldiers spreading out, searching the district. Where are we going? She asked as they ran. Maintenance tunnels, Jake said. The station's full of them. Old ventilation shafts, power conduits, waste management passages. Most people don't even know they exist. He pulled open what looked like a solid wall panel, revealing a dark tunnel behind it. I've been mapping them for 2 years. Why? Planning my own escape. He helped her through the opening. I've been saving money to leave this station, find a place that'll actually let me study engineering properly. Figured I'd need to know all the ways out when the time came. They climbed down a metal ladder into darkness. Thera could barely see, but Jake moved like he'd done this 100 times. Behind them, she heard soldiers shouting, getting closer. "Here," Jake whispered, pulling her into a side passage. They pressed against the wall as boots thundered past their location. The soldiers were in the tunnels now, but they were guessing, checking random passages without any real knowledge of the layout. Jake knew every turn, every junction, every hiding spot. They waited in silence as the soldiers passed, then moved deeper into the tunnel system. The sounds of pursuit gradually faded. Finally, Jake stopped in a small chamber lit by a single emergency light. "We'll be safe here for a while," he said. "They don't know these tunnels like I do." Thera slid down the wall, suddenly exhausted. An Empress, hiding in maintenance tunnels, depending on a mechanic who'd thrown away a fortune to help her. "You could have turned me in," she said. "You'd be rich." Jake sat down across from her, his flashlight casting shadows on the walls. "Money can't buy the kind of education I want," he said. "Besides, what kind of person would I be if I sold out someone who needed help?" He smiled. "My mom used to say that how you treat people when they're powerless tells you everything about who you really are." Thera had spent her life surrounded by people who calculated every action based on advantage and gain. This human had just sacrificed everything to give her a choice. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet," Jake said. "We're going to be down here for a while." 3 days passed in the tunnels. The soldiers searched the district thoroughly, checking every ship, questioning every resident. Jake and Thera moved through the maintenance passages like ghosts, always staying 2 steps ahead. Jake had stashed supplies in different locations: water bottles, food rations, even a few blankets. He'd been preparing for this kind of escape for years. On the 3rd night, they sat in a junction chamber while rain hammered on the station's outer hull. The sound echoed through the metal walls. Thera watched Jake pull out his battered notebook, adding new sketches by flashlight even now. "You never stop, do you?" she asked. Jake shrugged. "Stopping feels like giving up. And I've come too far to give up now." "Tell me," Thera said. "How does someone end up living in maintenance tunnels, studying engineering by flashlight?" Jake was quiet for a moment, his pencil hovering over the page. "My parents died when I was 8. Station malfunction in the agricultural sector. After that, I bounced between foster homes until I was 16. Nobody wanted a kid who asked too many questions about how things worked." He smiled, but there was old pain behind it. "I got my first job in a recycling plant. 10 hours a day sorting scrap metal. The pay was terrible, but I got to see broken machinery up close. Started figuring out what all the parts did." Thera listened, trying to imagine that life. She'd grown up in a palace with 1,000 servants. "I applied to every engineering academy within 5 sectors," Jake continued. "All the prestigious ones. Sent applications for 3 years straight." He flipped through his notebook, showing her rejection letters he'd tucked between the pages. They all said the same thing. No formal education, no references from established engineers, no family connections. "One administrator told me I should be realistic about my limitations." "But you didn't stop," Thera said. "Couldn't stop." Jake put the notebook away. "I worked as a dock loader, a waste processor, a food service worker. Every terrible job you can imagine. But I saved money. Bought manuals from salvage dealers. Taught myself to read 3 alien languages because the translated versions cost too much. Found mentors where I could, other mechanics who'd teach me things during breaks. Started my own garage 5 years ago with equipment I literally pulled from trash heaps." He looked at his grease-stained hands. "Every academy rejection made me angrier. Not at them, but at the idea that someone else gets to decide what I'm capable of learning. So I decided I'd become an engineer anyway, with or without their approval. And if they wouldn't teach me, I'd teach myself." Thera felt something crack inside her chest. "I've never fought for anything," she said quietly. "I was born into power. Everything was given to me. My title, my authority, my position. I never had to earn any of it. I never had to prove I deserved it." "That's not your fault," Jake said. "Maybe not. But it means I don't really know who I am without the title." She looked at him. "You know exactly who you are. You built yourself from nothing. I'm just what other people made me." Jake leaned forward. "So now's your chance to figure out who you want to be." "What do you mean?" "I've been saving money for 6 years," Jake said. "There's a frontier colony called New Helena, about 3 weeks from here. They don't care about credentials or family names. They need engineers, and they judge people on what they can do, not where they came from. I was planning to leave in a few months, But with the soldiers here, I think it's time to move up the schedule. Thera's heart started beating faster. You're leaving? I'm asking if you want to come with me, Jake said. Not as an empress. Not as someone running away. But as someone who wants to learn to build something real, to earn their own place in the world. The offer hung in the air between them. Thera thought about her empire, her throne, her responsibilities. But she also thought about the assassins, the court politics, the life where she was a symbol instead of a person. Yes, she said. I want to come. Jake grinned. Then we need a ship. And I think I know how to get one. They spent the next day planning. Thera knew Imperial security protocols inside and out. She knew which ships had the weakest monitoring systems, which docking times had the fewest guards, which authorization codes would work. Jake knew the station's layout, the blind spots in surveillance, the timing of patrol routes. There's a cargo hauler on platform 12, Thera said, studying the station map Jake had drawn. Mid-range vessel, suitable for long journeys. The security is standard Imperial protocol, which means I know exactly how to bypass it. Can you fly it? Jake asked. I've piloted larger vessels. Can you handle the engineering? If it has an engine, I can keep it running. They moved through the tunnels that night, emerging near platform 12 just after midnight. The cargo hauler sat quiet in its berth, crew quarters dark. Thera felt her training take over, moving silently, watching for guards, timing their approach perfectly. But this time she wasn't commanding. Jake was beside her, equal partner, watching her back while she worked on the access panel. When she hesitated at one point, unsure about a specific wire configuration, Jake pointed to the correct one without saying a word. They moved like they'd been doing this for years. The ship's door slid open. They slipped inside. You take the cockpit, Jake said. I'll get the engines ready. Jake, Thera called as he headed for the engine room. Thank you. For treating me like a person instead of a title. He smiled. That's what partners do. Thera sat in the pilot's seat, her hands moving over controls she'd been trained to use since childhood. But for the first time she wasn't following orders. She wasn't fulfilling duty. She was choosing her own path. The engines hummed to life. Station alarms started blaring, but they were already moving, pulling away from the dock, accelerating toward open space. Thera had commanded fleets, but she'd never felt more alive than this moment, escaping into the unknown with a mechanic who believed in her. 6 years. That's how long it took for everything to change. Thera stood at the viewport of their company headquarters on New Helena, watching cargo ships come and go. Their logo, a simple wrench crossed with a circuit diagram, marked every vessel. Miller Thera Engineering. They'd argued about the name for weeks. Jake wanted her name first. She insisted his should be. They'd compromised by putting his last name first and her first name second. Neither of them used titles anymore. We got another contract, Jake said, walking into the office with a data pad. His hands were still stained with grease, even though he spent more time managing than fixing these days. Some habits never died. Colony ship needs a complete propulsion overhaul. They want our hybrid system. Thera smiled. Their hybrid system, combining Velkoth precision with human improvisation, had become famous across the frontier. It was cheaper than Imperial technology, easier to repair, and somehow more reliable. Because when you designed something assuming people wouldn't have perfect conditions or unlimited resources, you built it better. How many employees do we have now? She asked. 247. And about 100 apprentices in the training program. Jake sat down, looking tired but satisfied. Remember when it was just you and me in that cargo hauler, eating ration bars and arguing about engine efficiency? She remembered. Those first years had been hard. Really hard. They'd arrived on New Helena with nothing but a stolen ship and knowledge in their heads. Jake had worked construction during the day to pay for materials. Thera had taught basic engineering classes at night for extra money. Every credit went back into their first workshop, a shed that leaked when it rained. But they built something real. Not with unlimited resources or royal authority. With their hands, their minds, and sheer stubborn persistence. The communication console beeped. Thera glanced at it, expecting another contract inquiry. Instead, her blood froze. The seal of the Velkoth Empire blazed across the screen. An official transmission. Jake, she said quietly. He saw her face and immediately came to her side. They'd been through too much for words. He just stood there, solid and steady as she opened the transmission. Admiral Corvith appeared on the screen. Thera recognized him, her father's most trusted military commander. Empress Thera, he said formally. We found you at last. Her hand moved toward the disconnect button, but Corvith raised his hand. Please. Hear me out. The conspiracy has been exposed. All the traitors are in custody. Your empire needs you. Your people are begging you to come home. Thera said nothing. We were wrong, Corvith continued, and she heard genuine pain in his voice. We failed to protect you. But more than that, we failed to listen to you. The empire has stagnated in your absence. We need the leader you've become. After 6 years of silence, the empire wanted her back. Part of her felt vindicated. Another part felt angry. But mostly she just felt tired of running. I need to think about this, she said. Of course. But Empress, we've been watching your work on the frontier. The innovations, the teaching methods, the way you've helped colonies thrive. That's the kind of leadership the empire desperately needs. Corvith bowed. Whatever you decide, know that your people never stopped hoping for your return. The transmission ended. Thera sat in silence, Jake's hand on her shoulder. What do you want to do? He asked. I don't know. She looked up at him. If I go back, everything changes again. The politics, the court, the responsibilities. But if I don't go back, millions of people will continue living under a system that needs fixing. Jake pulled up a chair and sat across from her, like they were back in that tunnel 6 years ago. So fix it. But on your terms this time. That night they talked until dawn. Making plans. Setting conditions. Figuring out what it would take to transform an empire. 3 months later, Thera's ship entered Velkoth space. Not fleeing this time. Returning. But not alone. The throne room was exactly as she remembered. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, thousands of courtiers gathered to witness the Empress's return. They expected a ceremony, a speech, a restoration of order. Thera walked in wearing simple work clothes. Jake walked beside her in his mechanic's coveralls. The court gasped. I'll reclaim the throne, Thera announced without preamble. But not to restore what was. I'm here to change everything. She looked across the sea of shocked faces. First condition, we're opening the Imperial Academies. No more entrance requirements based on family status or wealth. Anyone who wants to learn can learn. Murmurs of protest rippled through the court. Second condition, we're establishing public research centers in every major city. Free access to technical manuals, engineering equipment, training programs. Knowledge belongs to everyone, not just the elite. Empress, this is, one advisor started. Third condition, Thera continued, her voice sharp with authority. Jake Miller is my chief innovation advisor. He'll be restructuring how we approach technology, education, and problem-solving across the empire. Jake stepped forward. We're going to teach this empire something it's forgotten. Real innovation doesn't come from having unlimited resources. It comes from people who refuse to quit when things get hard. We're going to introduce what I call productive struggle, giving people challenges that force them to think, adapt, and create. The court erupted. Half the nobles were outraged. But Thera saw something else too, younger courtiers leaning forward, interested. Engineers and technicians nodding in agreement. Common workers in the back of the hall, hope lighting their faces. This isn't how we've ever done things, the High Chancellor protested. I know, Thera said. That's exactly the problem. You've perfected comfort but forgotten how to grow. You have everything so you've stopped fighting for anything. That ends now. It took 2 years to implement the changes. There was resistance. Some nobles left the court in protest. But for every person who resisted, 10 more embraced the new system. Young people flooded the academies. Apprenticeship programs overflowed with applicants. Innovation centers buzzed with activity. Jake set up workshops where Imperial engineers worked alongside self-taught mechanics. Where academy graduates collaborated with people who'd learned from manuals and scrap yards. The results were remarkable. Designs that were more practical, more efficient, more accessible. One evening, Thera found Jake in one of the new learning centers, helping a young student troubleshoot an engine problem. The student was using a flashlight because the overhead lamp had broken. Reminds me of someone, Thera said. Jake grinned. That night you found me studying? That changed my life. It changed mine too, Thera said. You taught me that real power isn't about controlling resources or commanding people. It's about unleashing potential in everyone regardless of where they start. She looked around at the bustling center, hundreds of people learning, building, creating. This was her empire now. Not perfect but growing. Not comfortable but alive. Thank you, she said to Jake, for showing me what an empress should really be.